Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Thanks for tuning in. This is an educational channel, and we check out um, different items that you may not know anything about because they've generally been suppressed and marginalized, and they might be a little bit difficult mentally or emotionally. And so that's kind of my niche. And this is another Bible Decode, number 451. And um, we've examined a lot of the Roman origins hypothesis. Is that the Romans were the true authors of the New Testament. They wrote it as a psychological operation against the Jews, and the psychological operation has turned out to last almost 2,000 years. But we are right at the cusp of ending it. Once the truthers, anons, and diggers can figure out that it's turtles all the way down, everything that you've investigated from the 21st century and the 20th century has turned out to be a psychological operation or a hoax or a false flag or, a spectacle. Well, go back through history and it's the same. It's the same all the way back. The Romans were masters of psychological operations, and they wrote the New Testament in order to mellow out the Jews, giving them a Jewish Messiah who was a Prince of Peace and believed in rendering unto Caesar and turning the other cheek. And it worked, not only on some of the Jews, but on some of the slaves and on the soldiers. And it took a long time for it to work. They put a lot of resources into it, and it happened very gradually. But it was pretty much hardwired in by the time of Emperor Constantine in the early 4th century. And the story is entirely fiction. And the Romans did create it as a limited hangout. And so there is a lot of stuff in the New Testament that is useful for your life. And they borrowed from many, many different sources to compile all these stories, cobble it together in Jesus's life. Stories from India, China, Japan, Persia, Egypt, along with Greece and Rome, and along with pagan mystery schools. All of it's in there, and it can all be traced. There's not a single thing in the New Testament that is original in terms of the stories. They all can be traced back to earlier stories. Obviously, a lot of the early Jewish Torah books and the histories and the prophets. And so another thing that the Romans did when they created the idea of Jesus is that they also created the idea of Satan. And interestingly, Satan, Christians will cling on to Satan just as hard as they cling on to Jesus, just about. But it is just as fraudulent, and there is no Satan in the Old Testament. The word is used, but it refers to human beings in the handful of times that it is used, and it is doesn't acquire any type of supernatural connotations until the Romans gave that up in the 1st century, and then it was amplified more throughout the Middle Ages and the early modern period. And now in the modern era, Hollywood has pretty much taking control, and our imagination of Satan is now really based on the Hollywood version. Um, but we are reading a book today from Kersey Graves, his 1865 book that is called The Biography of Satan. So he kind of gives you the origin and history of some of these different concepts of hell and Satan and so on. And we're about to start chapter 11, which is called Where is Hell? Ancient Traditions Respecting its Character and Location. St. John in Revelation 21:10 tells us he saw the New Jerusalem descend from God out of heaven. And as we have shown by previous historical disclosures in this work, that hell also descended from above, it being a much older institution than the New Jerusalem. We suggest the propriety of styling it the Old Jerusalem. We have followed it in its descent to the earth. We will now trace it to its present locality, the underground world, whither it was removed several thousand years ago. Various and multifarious were the notions among the ancients with respect to the substantial whereabouts of the fabled hell, the after-death depository for wicked souls. Some fancied its location in the sun. Others referred its geographical position to the moon. Others, again, imagined its unquenchable fires raged in the bowels of the earth. But the opinion finally became somewhat prevalent that it was hung or planted under the earth. Godfrey Higgins remarks relative to the ancient tradition with respect to its locality that, quote, the lower or southern hemisphere, which is hid in darkness in winter, and which is always attended with darkness, decay, disease, and death, and every kind of discomfort, became imaginarily controlled by, and consequently the abode of evil beings, now known as demons, devils, etc., and the abode itself as hell, while the upper hemisphere was the abode of celestial beings as gods, angels, etc. And no less various were the notions with respect to its character than with respect to its locality. Mr. Higgins shows that many believed it to be a place of utter darkness and a very cold place. This was perhaps before its combustible faggots had been lighted up or set on fire. The name for hell among the ancient Celts was Ilfin, which means cold climate, which shows that they also regarded it as a cold country. The ancient Gauls and Britons, Goths and Germans taught that hell was a place of dreadful darkness and was infested with venomous reptiles, ferocious beasts, and wicked spirits. The Egyptian astrologers taught that hell was a bottomless pit, the damned inmates being suspended on hooks fixed in the side of the pit, though many of the natives of that country held to a lake of fire and brimstone. The ancient Buddhists and Mexicans believed in a hell of unquenchable fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Here it may be remarked that the inhabitants of cold countries taught that hell was a hot place, a place of glowing, melting heat, while on the other hand, inhabitants of warm climates taught that the place of consignment for the wicked was as cold as a mountain of ice. It seems like it's the opposite of that. Didn't he just said that the Europeans saw it was a place of darkness and cold, And then the Egyptians and Mexicans believed it a hot place. So I'm not sure where he's getting that. It seems like it's the opposite of what he's saying. So that all who were captured and carried away to Pluto's realms by old Plug Ugly underwent a change of climate, whether they hailed from the torrid or frigid zone. I absolutely don't get that. Okay, that's the end of chapter 11. Chapter 12 is called Origin of the Notion of Man's Evil Thoughts Being Prompted by a Devil. Satanic agency having been restricted to the phenomena of the external world. And again, this book was written in 1865. Back then, they had these long names for chapters like that. Here we wish it distinctly noted as an important historical fact that the conception of a devil and a hell long existed before the remotest idea was entertained that either had anything to do with or any connection with punishment in a future life. Both had a fabled existence in the external world among the physical elements long before just lost my place there. Long before the devil was made an agent of punishment, or hell a place of punishment for the wicked after death in the imaginations of the people. Indeed, we are credibly informed. The Manichaeans long believed hell to be the blissful abode of the righteous. The first conception of evil and malevolent beings, as we have just intimated, restricted their sphere of operations to the physical world, to the violent storms and destructive elements, and all the unpropitious events of nature. In their utter ignorance of natural causes, a superstitious age would naturally assign such things to imaginary beings. But no thought seems to have been entertained that the malicious denizens of the evil world had anything to do with the thoughts or actions of men, not even the most wicked and vicious. For the reason that man's moral perceptions were not at that period sufficiently developed to observe any distinction between good and bad actions. The nature and effects of immoral actions had not been as yet discovered. Everything, as in the Jewish Bible, was ascribed to God. Their perception of any distinction or line of demarcation between virtue and vice ran too low to incite even the thought that any action or line of conduct that any man could pursue could be sufficiently bad or criminal to require any punishment to be sent after him and inflicted on him after he left this world. Nor had the priesthood as yet acquired sufficient ascendancy over the people to lead them to invent a hell to punish delinquent pew renters or tithe payers, as we shall hereafter show it to be an institution of their getting up. As man's moral perceptions grew and expanded and ripened into the conviction that some actions were good and some bad to such a degree of difference as to require a separate and distinct source for their origin, he began to look around him to find a way of accounting for each class of actions separately, and as the heavens above and the great imaginary abyss below the earth were already peopled with imaginary beings of different and opposite characters, it was easy, it was natural to begin to associate these beings with the actions of men, and to conclude that all good actions were incited by good beings, or by the good God, as they styled the Supreme Being, and all evil and immoral actions by the evil god, the master mischief maker. And the conception in this respect seems to have been at first wholly anthropomorphic and unspiritual or sensuous, at least local and circumscribed. The devil, it was thought, could not influence the actions of men unless bodily present with them. He was not then, as now, omnipresent and invested with the omnipotent power to tempt or seduce millions at a time, though scattered all over the globe at an immeasurable distance from him and from each other. The Hindus, Buddhists, Burmese, and some of the Chinese taught that the maleficent beings called devils or demons entered body, head, and heels into the minds of men, and from there rolled out their evil thoughts and prompted them to vicious actions. Most of the ancient religious teachers of the Oriental schools taught that old King Satan was supplied with a numerous train or retinue of inferior sub-devils who acted as sub-agents in the work of decoying souls and leading them into perdition. The Hindu Bible, more than 3,000 years old, teaches this doctrine and tells us that the semi-devils were completely under the control of the master demon or devil in chief and entered the minds of men at his bidding, but that they could be ejected at any time by exorcisms and prayers of the priests, especially if the patient's pockets were well lined with filthy lucre, which often seemed to operate as a powerful charm in the way of dispelling the diabolical intruders from the inner man and henceforth keeping them at a respectable distance. Now, the foregoing notions of the Orientalists seem to be fully recognized and acknowledged by Christ and his apostles as a part of the Christian plan of salvation. No less than 9 times is Christ represented as casting out devils, and on several occasions as having a familiar chat with them. At one time, he is said to have ousted 7 at a clip. They were tumbled pell-mell out of a respectable Christian lady whom we would naturally have supposed was too high-minded to entertain such low company. Okay, that's the end of chapter 12. Chapter 13 is called The Christian's Devil, Whence Imported or Borrowed. And I'm running a little bit behind today, so again, we're going to cut it short here, and we will get into chapter 13 when we return tomorrow. And meanwhile, that will do it for today. Like, share, subscribe, comment, contribute, and please come back tomorrow for another episode of Bible Decode. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a great day.